welcome back to my channel and welcome to part 4 of episode 2 of Spells and Specialists, the show where we use magic and stories to teach technical topics and communicate science. With me here today, of course, is my co-host, C.R. Rowanson. Hey, Clark.
Hi.
Do you want to give people a bit of a rundown of who you are and what you do in case they've just stumbled across this video?
Certainly. I am C.R. Rowanson, also known as the Magic Engineer. I help storytellers just with their stories. My whole thing is I want to get you excited and get you back to writing. My sub-focus, especially with my YouTube channel, is magic systems, helping people craft and repair them. And these are all of the fantastical elements from our stories, from sword and sorcery to advanced tech and monster of the week. Any of that I consider magic, which I just love talking about so much.
Yeah, and if you caught part 3 of this episode, you saw all 3 of us just having the best time with this magic system blueprint. We had such fun, and of course we had fun with Corri Moss-Hunter, who is our guest for this entire episode. And in case people haven't heard you introduce yourself 3 times, could you please do it again?
Absolutely. Elizabeth Corri Moss-Hunter. Corri's just fine, please. I'm a licensed marriage, family, child therapist in California. I'm running my private practice here, working with folks on emotions, behaviors, boundaries, things like stress to trauma, anxiety, and depression. I work with adults and children.
Yeah, and we talked about all of those things. Functions of behavior is kind of the term that we keep coming back to in this episode. We talked about symptomology and boundaries and something called EMDR, which might blow your mind. So I would definitely recommend going back to see parts 1 through 3. They definitely blew my mind. So I would highly recommend. Part 1 can be found on this channel, Ecofictology. That is where we did all of the learning of cool stuff. And then part 2, we found the seed crystal, our point of inspiration for part 3, which was the magic system. And those 2 parts can be found on Clark's channel, the Magic Engineer. Everything will be linked down below in the description. But right now, today, here, we are jumping into part 4. And the goal of part 4 is to take everything we've talked about. Look at Clark going already.
It's gonna be fun. Sorry.
It is gonna be fun. It is gonna be fun. And we're brainstorming a story, and we've touched on a lot of narrative elements in the previous parts, but we're going to bring it all together today to make sure that we come up with a story that communicates what we want to teach about everything that we've talked about. So we're taking the magic system that we developed with the blueprint as a starting point, and also everything that we went through to get the seed crystal. But now we're going to start talking about things like characters and conflict and plot and world building and all that kind of stuff. And it's interesting because if you go back to part 2, Corri was very inspired by setting. And so we went through a lot of world building and setting aspects in order to even come up with the seed crystal. So we will be revisiting a lot of elements that came up in part 2 and part 3, because really half of our work today has already been done just because of how your wonderful brain works and how you imagine stories.
I love
and that just means that we get to spend more time on it.
Yay.
Yeah, that's my hack. I've hacked it. I've hacked how to get a long episode into a short video. I don't know how I did that. It was unintentional, but I've done it.
You guys ask perfect questions and are really wonderful for soundboarding and building this story in this world. So thank you for your assistance and the experience in being able to walk through this process with you both.
Well, we're not done yet. We'll see how you feel at the end.
Yeah, maybe this will ruin everything, but I don't think so. I doubt that will happen. Before we launch into everything, I am going to put just a slight trigger warning here, because in previous parts we have had mentions of self-harm, and I have the feeling it's going to come up again because of some of the aspects of the magic system that we talked about in part 3. So if that is a trigger for you, we totally understand. This part might not be for you, depending how big a prominent role it plays.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I will have timestamps down in the description, and you can skip the parts where it is mentioned if it ends up not playing a very big role at all.
We just touched on it pretty briefly and pretty high level in the previous episodes.
Yeah.
This might be a little more detailed.
Exactly.
Speaking
so
of mental health, if possible, I'd love to add some information for lines to reach out for, different helplines and things like that that people can call and utilize for resources if they feel they need to reach out for mental health help.
Absolutely. Yeah. That would be great. And we will put all of that information into the description. Just wanted to let everyone know what we're getting into, potentially what we might be getting into. Okay, so to recap a little bit for potential viewers who haven't seen the previous parts, and also to get our kind of creative juices flowing, I think it would be good to start by going round and each mentioning a few things that caught our attention from the last sessions. Something that immediately created images or that you can use as a starting point that you think would be really great to include in a story. So I'll popcorn to you. I can start just to get the ball rolling, and then I'll probably call on Corri. So just
I'll be ready.
Yeah, be ready. So something that really stuck out to me in the previous episode was this idea of each, because our world is populated with magical creatures. No humans, we're doing magical creatures only. And I like that in and of itself, but I really like the idea that each kind of race of magical creatures has its own type of magic, and that there is still variability between individuals and how they respond to that magic. But I like that each race kind of has their own, because it makes me think of like a team of main characters that goes on whatever journey or quest or what have you we put into this story. It makes me think, okay, well, they've got that kind of magic and they've got that kind of magic. So it sounds like there are things that one person alone cannot do. So it sounds like a team to me. And little tidbits like that get me thinking about characters and conflict and things like that. I'm getting all breathless. I'm so excited. I can't getting ahead of myself. I can't speak.
I wrote that down as a favorite part of our last video as well. I'm excited to explore the different magical races and how they use those magic flow independently as a race, and variability amongst age. I'm really excited to see how that develops.
Yeah, that's very cool.
I also really I latched on to the idea of a family perspective, because we're also going to be talking about children. I think that this family dynamic is going to play an important role. So Lovis, I love that you're envisioning a team here, that really resounds with me. So
excellent.
I'm all on board. Functions of behavior have to play a part. That's a common theme throughout all of our videos. And I think too, we'll probably talk a little more about that window of tolerance and how the events fall on a spectrum to stress for people who are newly experienced or exposed to these things versus trauma, people who have witnessed some of these really difficult things and how that gets coded. Things on a scale of anxiety to depression and what that looks like. Be really exciting.
Definitely.
Clark, what latched on in your mind?
I am very interested in exploring how the functions of behavior are going to manifest as an extension of the magic. Like I've already got a number of ideas, and part of that, I'm especially interested to explore. If I were working on the story, if I were to write the story, one of the things I would want to explore would be the adaptive nature of kids, but just because you're adapting doesn't mean it's a good thing. Because one of my own maladaptions we talked about actually in the first video with Corri is just kind of like physical outbursts. It's something that one of the ways that I learned to manage my temper when I was getting really frustrated with stuff. And I really only did it when I was alone. I wouldn't like do this in public in the middle of the library or anything, but I would slam my hands on the table. I would throw the book across the room, physical outbursts that did help so that I could keep it managed without lashing out at people, but that doesn't mean it was a healthy adaptation. So I'm interested to look at ways the magic is going to take on that form, and that would be a very fascinating thing to explore with kids of like, oh, I found a way to cope with this, and them then having to go through the process of like, oh yeah, this works as a coping mechanism, but maybe it's not the best one.
Absolutely. And I think we'll talk
Better
more
than
about that
nothing.
as some of the differences of those manifestations of symptomology, right? Like with my own struggles with depression off and on when I was a teenager, that looked a lot different than my adult experiences with depression, because teens tend to withdraw to a degree, which adults do, but the difference being that teenagers tend to withdraw from adults and maintain closeness with their best friends. So that sometimes looks different in adults who would tend to have a more generalized withdrawal pattern.
From everything.
Mm.
Interesting. No comment.
No comment, no comment. Okay, great, good. We're on a good track. Something else that I'll throw out there is that we've mentioned it a couple times that we want to feature kids, and because the change in the flow of magic has disoriented adults, right? Their magic is now unpredictable, it's unreliable. They don't know how to control it. Some of it is becoming harmful. Some of them are being aggressive versus some of them are putting up walls and hiding away and all these things. So the adults don't really know what's going on right now. They're not very useful at the moment. Whereas kids, especially younger kids, might not have access to the magic yet, or they might not be as affected as adults, and they can't remember a before time. So the naturalness of the magic is higher to them than it is to the adults. So to me, that screams middle grade storytelling.
Yeah.
Like if we feature kids as this team of main characters, and if we give them the agency, that they're like, our parents don't know, we aren't doing anything useful, they have no idea what's going on, we have to figure this out. In my head, something that would kind of trigger a kid to take on that kind of responsibility is like if a sibling started exhibiting some of these signs. If like this, something we mentioned before was maybe if they have fire magic and suddenly they're burning themselves instead of being able to control the fire. As a young child, if you see your older sibling who was always, your protector and and everything, and then suddenly they're a danger to themselves, that to me, when I was a kid, I think that would have been a big motivator for me. So that's kind of an impetus, an inciting incident, if you will.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where my head went. What kind of images, are floating around for you? How about Clark? You look like you want to say something.
I don't have any specific images. I was ready to start talking about some of the plot and overall conflict and stuff. I don't.
Yeah, if you got ideas, throw them out.
Well, it's more of a question, because when you're doing it in YA middle grade, it's not to say you can't have like world sweeping stakes, like, right? You do it in Chronicles of Narnia. Mike Thayer does a really good job of that in the Epic Adventures of the Techno Wizard. There is room for that, but a lot of that often ties into portal fantasy. What I'm trying to wrap my head around right now is what the conflict is going to be for these kids to solve, because while there is a fact of the adults are off balance and feeling a loss of control and don't know what to do, there's only so much that kids are actually going to be able to solve. There's only so much that like a small group of people are actually going to be able to solve. So I'm trying to wrap my head around what that struggle might be, whether it's manifestation of like additional monsters, or if this is more of a kind of slice of life contemporary story where it's them dealing with very real problems, and at the end of it is just that they have reached kind of a new stage of evolution, kind of like Bridge to Terabithia or something. I'm trying to wrap my head around what kind of story this can and needs to be.
And when you mentioned in one of our earlier videos, I think it was a brief mention in our second video, and we talked, I think, a little bit in last time about how this sort of dam, the magic, flooded. That there was a party, like there was something that had to be done. The party 5 or 10 years ago did it, and it was unavoidable. And now these are the consequences of that. I think while we're talking about the teenage perspective, like 12 years and above are starting to deal with abstract thinking, hypothetical, moral, and ethical reasoning. That's really appealing. But with the dynamic of becoming a new party, right? Like a party before caused this and had to solve a problem. I think it only makes sense that a party now forms in this snapshot of time to deal with where we're at in the current state of affairs. So if there's a teenager and an adult, all of these different races, there's this party forming to help showcase the dynamic of different races and how that magic manifests, and the different maybe phases of life or skills that these children and adults have to utilize together to help solve whatever problem they're dealing with now. I like the idea of a party coming together, not just of a family of one race specifically. I feel like if it's a party, it will help showcase some of the different dynamics going on within our world.
I have a thought, but I want to hear if you have anything first, Lovis, but yeah.
Okay. Latching onto what you just said, Corey, like a group forming or a party forming with a goal, we do need a goal for them. And throwing out ideas for goals, if they're thinking, okay, well, we know what happened 10 years ago and this is the aftermath, can we go and fix it? Can we go and reverse it? What can we do to patch up the dam? Can we or can we give the magic back? Can we put it back? Something that requires them to travel to this place that was destroyed, where the magic is all flowing out from, and try to patch it back up or reverse some of the damage, is kind of where my head goes, like a group or a party of people that goes to try and fix something.
Yeah. And I think part of the question there is whether we want this to be something that is just reversible or not. And that's something that I would kind of toss up both on the ecology side and on the psychology side, is whether it's that simple or not, or whether we kind of want a reflection of the true nature of the world. Because kind of I'm going to start with that question. Is that something that we feel would just be easily repairable, or
I don't think
what?
it should be as easy as just putting the dam, like building another dam, right? Like finding a cap. There's a reason that the party had to destroy it before. We don't necessarily have to know or understand why at this moment, but I think undoing that might not help the story.
So
okay, so then sorry, go ahead.
The idea I had that kind of popped in is, what if these kids end up being agents of change for the city, which could then potentially ripple out through the world. So because contemporary stuff is weird because there's not usually like one big conflict, right? But it's very vague in my head. But just what I had a picture of that started actually to get me choked up as I'm sitting here thinking about it is, you have a group of kids who have started to figure out what is wrong and are spearheading an organization and a movement to help people figure stuff out and get a hold of themselves. So I'm struggling to think of some really good examples, but like some of those grassroots things you see where kids get like really into some of the ecology or something like that. You might have something like that about a mix of ecology and psychology, where they're like, yeah, this started as a school project, but we went and we asked questions and we learned, and we have learned some things about the nature of the problem we are facing, and we need to change, and we want to help you change. And that just makes me like really like both sad and happy there, just like these kids getting that set up to have this organization where they're just like bringing in their parents, bringing in their siblings and other people to be like, we're going to help you be okay.
Yeah.
I like that. And I like that it evokes such an emotion already.
I'm a sucker.
That's always good. That's always good.
I'm in. I'm along for the ride.
Yeah.
Can't stop reading now.
No. And that actually fits pretty well, because I mean, if you wanted it to reflect kind of our ecological reality right now, a little bit, then we can't just reverse it. It's not just a matter of, you can't just fix it, but what people are focusing on is behavioral change. So what can, yes, you have the big corporations that need to pretty much stop what they're doing, but on an individual level, there are aspects of behavioral change and change in choice and change in perspective that would make, if everyone did it, that would make a big difference, kind of thing. And like, yeah, resource use on the individual level. So we could go down that route, and then we would kind of have to think about the different steps that, how did these kids figure it out, and therefore how are they going to teach it to everybody else? So I can enlighten you. I can enlighten you of where we're going, because I'm holding all the cards at the moment. So as we were talking, I was making a note on my very sophisticated piece of paper here that looks somewhat like this. And I was categorizing what we were saying into these 5 categories. Conflict: what is the main point of contention? What is happening? What is the problem? Character: who is it happening to? Goal: what do they want to get to? Stakes: what do they lose if they don't address the conflict? And action: what are they going to do to fix it or address it in some way? So our goal here with this is that by the end, it would be really great to be able to craft a pitch. And the pitch kind of comes in this form. Because of conflict, character must take action in order to goal, or else stakes. So from part 2, getting all the parts mixed up, from part 2, we mostly talked about conflict and character. We talked about environmental trauma leads to access to magic breaking down. This changed in the last part, so that's no longer applicable. That's fine. In terms of characters, we talked about there maybe being a therapist, because somebody's got to have the knowledge, right, to give to understand these functions of behaviors that we've been talking about. People come to them to understand these feelings of loss. We have the adults who are using magic instinctually. We have the kids who are going to feature very heavily in our story now, and of course they're all magical creatures. So we talked a lot about conflict and character. What we didn't talk a lot about was goal, stakes, and action. Since we've been chatting, we now have something in every category, because we've been talking about goal. Are we able to fix it? Are we able to reverse it? Is there a change in behavior that we're trying to get to? And by the end, we said we wanted the kids to be able to go and help people get a hold of themselves and sort it out for themselves and how they deal with their new baseline. The stakes, we talked about that in part 3. The magic could run out because we decided it was a finite resource that was no longer renewable because we were kind of outpacing the speed at which it can renew itself. Also, people have a personal limit, and therefore they could burn out, is the term that we used in the last one. Yeah. And we also have action, which is what we were just talking about now. What action are the kids going to take in order to get to that goal of helping their family members and their siblings and friends and everything? So this is kind of the structure that I was going for, trying to put everything into these categories so that by the end we pick and choose what we want to craft our story out of, and then we have a nice, beautiful pitch by the end.
I love it. And Clark, you mentioned these grassroots type inspired movement. I'm envisioning in combination with the experience or the understanding of the world that these young kids are living through, these young adults are living through, to play a piece of it, right? That's their current understanding. That's their introduction for maybe the snapshot of time. But then through maybe interviews and action, right? Like they're trying to get answers, talking to people who know the before times, have a wider range of symptomology or a depth of clinical significance for emotional expression, that this is how the magic is manifesting itself in functions of behavior, right? That interview process.
So I try not to take over with stuff. I try. I just have a lot of ideas, but I would like to toss something out there and see what you guys think. And this is definitely beyond the scope of what we normally want to do. But just as we're talking about this, which just again, I'm going to do a tangent on a tangent because it's what I do. I never really read much of the contemporary fiction stuff. My mom would have to force me to read that because I was much more interested in the fantasy and the horror and all of the fantastical elements. And I'm super fascinated by this because I can do both. You can tell the types of stories you would see in contemporary fiction, but with all of these fantastical elements that would have held young Clark's interest. But if I were to take this and run with it on my own right now, I'm almost seeing like a short series where you have a group of kids, because I do see this being like an evolution of stuff where the first problem might be something as simple as the equivalent of a science fair project, that these guys are working together and they chose this thing, they're learning it, like they may have just chose like magic stability or just like magic saturation or just something about the magical nature of the world, and they are going and learning, and their perspective is leading them to this conclusion that is not appealing and not accepted. And that can be like a big part of the conflict with that one, is them having to defend their findings and their thesis, which I really like those kinds of stories. But that can shift, because then with each book, you could shift perspective to the POV of one of the other characters in the group. So the first one might be a character who this is being a little stereotypical, maybe kind of, I say stereotypical for fictional races, could just be like an elf, and they are very focused on their grades and their academics, which is why the struggle there is them being like, people are challenging our findings and that's not okay. The next one could move over to like a troll, who they are trying to deal with some more internal conflicts in their family, and they're starting to see the effects of what they discovered on their family and how that's playing out. Then you could shift to somebody else who's then like, I want to start helping other people. I want to help my friends because they're struggling. And then somebody else would be like, I was just helped by my friend and I want to be able to help these next people. Like, that is what is forming in my head, but that is definitely me taking over. And I wanted to put that out there and see what you guys thought.
I like the idea of discovery that was always really appealing to me. Like, you know, the mystery of Dresden Files, right? You have this scenario, this world that you're thrown into, and you have some understanding of magic and how it behaves, but there are some surprises, and you do have to figure out why the current situation is happening. I really enjoy that. So I think taking an academic route to at least start the perspective is really helpful, because we get to ask all these questions of the world and the characters, and figure out why it's going on or what is happening and how that impacts everyone. I'm biased. I'm an academic mind, so
Yeah.
I'll just throw that out there.
What do you think, Lovis? How do you feel about that?
This all sounds very good. I like the idea of thinking of it as a series, and that not all the discovery has to happen in one book kind of thing. So you can have kind of more of a local conflict, like the science fair project or some kind of school project, and then, you know, that's a win that they can aim for. But then we introduce all of these family dynamics, we introduce friendships, we introduce challenging of findings, and then in the next book, one of them can be like, I'm not satisfied that we've got an A on our science fair project. We know it works. We have to try it. And then they have to find people who are willing to try it.
Right.
And then it builds.
Generalize the data.
Yeah. we got an A, and we got an A because we identified a problem. So just because we got an A, the problem's still there. Maybe we should do something about the problem.
Exactly. My question.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, Corri.
It makes me think too about how the behavior is manifested as a function of this magic, right? Because if we start with this, say, elves for their intellect and curiosity, we may not even know all of the magical races that are there. Like, do we think some have gone extinct because they just aren't visible anymore, which maybe plays a piece of the of the development, right, of cognition and abstract thinking and object permanence, or as a way of evasive behavior? Like, there is a lot potentially going on to understand the drives, the motivation of behavior. Clark, you look so excited.
Yeah, so excited.
Just some things clicked into place in my head with the functions of behavior, because I think it's very useful when you can have patterns to follow, even if your overall presentation is going to be less rational. So as somebody telling the story, what you would always be able to fall back on is spend some time developing the powers of that species and then that person, and then you can pick one or more of the functions of behavior and be like, if these are their driving functions at the moment, what would their magic do to try and address that? So just what you said about these people they thought were extinct, if there is a long-lived but very tight-knit community of a specific race that have similar enough values, they might actually collectively, as a group, be triggered into a function of escape. And they either all go into hibernation or they all turn invisible. And that can be a weird thing where it then takes one of the kids to have enough of a shift in the perspective that they can break out of that automatic response and be like, hey, we still exist and we need help.
Right, our learned behavior, our own group of adaptation may be maladaptive. It may not serve the societal function or the ecological function to help the magic in its renewable source.
Yeah, they might even have escaped into their like own mini reality where they don't interact with anybody at all. But that's why my eyes lit up, is then at any point, if anybody wanted to run with this idea, you could take the race, you could take the character, and then you could just pick one of the functions and be like, what could happen with there? Because I think that's where the fire image I was talking about. So you have somebody who does fire magic, they're usually immune to fire, but it is now the automatic function that is kicking into place because they don't know how to handle this stuff. And the emotions and behaviors are shifting so that it is trying to turn that from an internal pain to an external pain.
Yes.
So that's why I was okay.
Something you just said, like, because you said you talked about focusing on the functional behaviors, and I thought, could we do a 4-part series where each book we focus on one functional behavior? And actually the science fair project, they're like, I want to know what happened to this extinct group of creatures, because I don't think they're extinct. So they go and learn about them, and then they're like, oh,
they're still
you know,
here.
some of these things, I recognize this from some other things that we're seeing in the city, and actually maybe this is a wider problem. And then they start talking about the functional behaviors.
And depending on the age range, it might be that like their proof is this kid from this clan.
Yeah, they bring them back to give like testimony.
Because all of the parents are just like, that's just your imaginary friend. You're a little old for that, aren't you?
Right.
Yeah.
And they're
because
like,
they don't actually,
not imaginary.
He's real.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm excited. Okay.
That
Okay,
would be both adorable
that down.
and incredibly moving. Like, yes, just like,
Okay.
no, like, and they can be interacting with their friend and trying to help them with that. And that's where that can spiral, right? Is because then that can turn into a thing of like, these people are here and they're not doing okay. Like that can give you the next step of like, we need to help these specific people. This person is now our friend and their clan is in trouble and doesn't even necessarily know they're in trouble yet. And they can integrate that clan, and then that's where somebody can, in the third book, they can turn to helping like specific people in their family who are really hurting to get to like broaden that out. And then the last one could be them like scaling it up. I really, really like this.
Yeah.
Cool. So is this, Corri, what do you think would be the most effective way to communicate about these functional behaviors? Do you want to show all of them in the first book, or do you think it would be easier to digest to show one of them? Like for example, if we're doing these extinct races, then we'd be talking probably about the escape or the avoidance
Absolutely
functional behavior. So if we focus on that for one book and then like introduce the other ones later, or do you think having a complete picture from the beginning is a better idea?
I like the idea, I think, of separating the functions of behavior, just because we can also talk about the range of expression of that particular behavior. Right, when we're talking about the window of tolerance and how people react or adapt or operate within that stressful window, sometimes it works really well, and sometimes it's maladaptive. But when we are able to break down the functions of behavior into different parts, I think sticking with the one for the book helps showcase some of the different symptoms that can pop up within that range.
And there is some room for flexibility, because either it could go a little bit past just 4 book, right? Like the 4 could be building up and then 5 is tying it all together. Or also with these kinds of stories, after you have really delved into, so I know we said that this is going to be like soft irrational, but this is based on a soft science thing, right? So the magic is definitely irrational, but there's some of this more rational macro scale stuff going on. So after you spend a book or 2 focusing on 2 very specific ones, it will be much easier both for the characters and, more importantly, for the readers to start consuming more at once. So by the time you get to book 3 and 4, you can explore, you might be exploring a third one primarily, but you can be like, we're looking at this one primarily, but we're also noticing some strange interactions where it's not, we don't just consider them in isolation. It's this one and how it's combining with this and combining with this. And we need to consider that. It can grow in complexity as we move forward, even while focusing predominantly on a specific area.
For sure. And actually we can bring them all, we can allude to them all in the first one with this team of characters. If each one of them kind of represents, or them or one of their family members represents a different function of behavior, then each book can kind of like highlight a different member of that group. And
I love how we're talking about the idea here that the races may characterize different functions, but they also have different powers and how that manifests. It's so exciting. I'm so excited.
Okay. I like it.
I don't know, this, this is really cool. But what else is there? Like, what else do we need to do? I guess because
Yeah.
I want to
So
jump into a more detailed outline, and I'm trying hard to stop myself. So
well, if we think about this conflict, character, goal, stakes, action. So if we want to define the goal a little bit more and the stakes a little bit more, I think, because if we define the goal a little bit more, then we know kind of what the resolution will look like of this book. If we just focus on the first book, we kind of now have a long-term trajectory for the series. The first book is, if we're going with this idea of, okay, there's a science fair project and this kid gathers his friends or her friends, their friends, and says, I want to study this extinct group because I've heard rumors that they're not extinct or something. And they go along with that. So the conflict, they probably get a lot of pushback for that because,
That's not real.
It's
You're
not
wrong.
real. The parents don't believe it. The teachers maybe don't believe it. So they probably get a lot of pushback for that, which if you're thinking on the scale of, the mental scale of a kid, that's a big conflict for them.
Absolutely. Likely to cause some stress.
Yeah. Go, Clark.
just I always feel like I'm taking over, and I hope you guys don't feel that way. But here's kind of the pitch that popped in my head is name, just insert name, just like Meredith, I don't know, is a troubled young pixie who has to work with her friends to present their science fair project and prove the existence of her supposedly imaginary friend, or she will fail whatever grade.
Yeah, pretty much. That's bringing the goal a little, like, prove the existence as a science fair project or fail, and the stakes are failure of the class.
And then the extra little hook is that, like, they have to prove the existence of her supposedly imaginary friend or fail.
If we look at it in terms of school, history tends to have much more of an authority type structure, right? Like, this is the way history happened. And some of the adults may not want to acknowledge or be able to remember if it was truly traumatic, right? Memories can get coded incorrectly. Some of the adults or the history teachers may not want to acknowledge the before times.
So maybe a history project rather than a science project?
Then I think the history might be a better showcase for, one, the trauma symptoms and the range that can impact adults and children. Generational trauma might play a role here.
Yeah.
But then the authority component too, the stance to say, no, kid, you're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I will fail you if you put this in your project.
Yeah.
I especially like the idea of it being blocked out to the point, like, it was just 10 years ago, but this was so effectively done that all adults think these people were just myth. Like, they never existed. Not
never
just are they
existed or
extinct.
went extinct. That's two different.
I mean, you could go either way, but just like the whole blocking it out, what I'm saying is these people would have existed as recently as 10 years ago. And depending on how severe the trauma was, like on a whole, they may have blocked out their existence entirely, especially if aided by the magic of this clan that is trying to escape and hide themselves. Those may have coupled together between the trauma of the adults and the maladaptive magic of these people to be like, no, they never really existed.
Maybe that race has their magic is like mental, like changing your thoughts or influencing your thoughts or something.
Stuff, yeah.
Illusions, yeah.
Which makes it even more important that we acknowledge and contact their existence, because they're going to be a part of the solution.
Yeah, because they're going to be a part of the solution.
Yes.
That's it.
Right, because if their goal of this race is to hide for survival, right? They're operating outside of the window to protect themselves for evasive protection.
So
theoretically, then a younger aged person, magical creature of that race might not be as good at it. They made a mistake.
It could be just an accidental thing where they're exploring this, and it may have initially started as a historical project of just like, yeah, we're just going to report on this mythical race of people and why they appear up through all of our histories and stuff like that, right?
Oh, and then they make friends with
And
one
then
of
this one
them.
shows up and they're like, oh, we aren't reporting on a myth anymore. And that can be the point where the teacher becomes antagonistic and is like, no, you can't state this as fact. You can't state this as truth.
They go and find this erased race, right? Either in their own city or on the outskirts of their city or somewhere nearby, so that otherwise we have to kind of get rid of their parents. Although if their parents are disoriented and vague, they might not really be as on top of where their kids are.
When we talk about stressors and the spectrum of clinical significance, right? Adults often deal with depression, anxiety, and trauma a little bit differently. They may be turning to things more consistently like drugs or alcohol or avoidance and withdrawal type symptoms from people as a whole. So you may be seeing more isolated families, more types of substance abuse where neglect or leaving teenagers to fend for themselves and kind of dealing with the parentification is maybe the new normal.
They ran into
Yeah.
this kid because he's being neglected and was just out wandering around.
Oh
Yeah.
God, so heartbreaking.
It is. Oh man.
And then maybe they do have to talk to more people within that group, so they kind of do
Yes.
some interviews like we mentioned before.
I think that'd be a good focus. Like that clan might actually be a good focus for the series as a whole.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the series can be like, well, we helped this clan and we helped some of our own siblings and family along the way. And now it ends with them being like, we want to make this bigger. We want to help more people. In fact, we need to.
Yeah. So, okay.
I like that a
So
lot.
if we jump on this, so character or group of characters, if it's a group project, I think I quite like this group dynamic.
Yes.
And it opens a lot of doors for the future books. So if we say for a group history project, they must prove the identity or prove the existence of one of the members' imaginary friend and their entire race, or else their horrible history teacher will fail them. Corri, as our resident specialist of functional behaviors, does this pitch and these actions that we have outlined, do you think they facilitate the communication of functional behaviors and boundaries and symptomology of responses to trauma?
I am excited to hear about the avoidance behavior. I'm wondering what our main character's function is. I think we maybe have some room to define the two of them here while we're dealing or wrestling with the avoidance, and that's what we're really uncovering. I think we need to maybe define the current status quo for what we're familiar with and what our readers will be seeing more significantly.
That's a good point. That's a good point. I can imagine that our main character, in order to pick a fight with your history teacher, there's an element of wanting some attention there, I would imagine.
Right.
So maybe our main character for book one, maybe they're experiencing the attention seeking.
Maybe book one is all attention focused.
And if this race in particular that we are introduced to from this perspective, the history teacher then would be seeking the attention for the like aggressive stance, right? Like this is going to garner me academic accolade for asserting the status quo. That will garner attention in that regard. So I think starting with attention might be a really good place, especially if we're looking at gaining attention of the other extinct race who's avoiding.
Yeah, I think that would work really well because the main character is wanting attention to be like, I'm not stupid, I'm smart. The teacher is there going, I don't want the wrong attention. Like if I let this fly, you don't know what's going to come down on me. Like nobody's going to accept this and that's going to reflect on me. And I don't want that. And then this lost kid, if they're neglected through avoidance and other stuff that's happening, they're also just seeking attention and connection with their peers.
And
Yeah.
negative attention is still attention, right? You can have a screaming, tantruming child or adult in some cases that gets the attention and serves the function. It is rewarded because the wrong behavior or the good behavior receives the
What you
desired outcome.
wanted.
So, okay, good. So we've got quite a few examples of the attention function of behavior, and we've got the erased extinct race that is exhibiting on the whole avoidance behavior, although potentially they might find a bit more variability once the possibility of being seen presents itself. Maybe a few of them don't want to avoid as much as the rest.
And now defining the current, I don't want to derail the process, but now I'm also wondering what magic this population we're introduced to has, right? When you say that this is a primarily attention-seeking race of the functions of behavior, Clark, you've mentioned in a couple examples fire, and that just screams
like fire breathing,
right?
or
Fire
like,
breathing, fire usage, right? And maybe the evasive magic, the race that we're introduced to or looking for, has some sort of like shadow magic, invisibility magic.
To do with escape,
I like it.
What
to
does
deal with the avoidance,
our academic attention seeker, what kind of magic has that kind of a flair for attention?
What about either shape-shifting or illusion magic, like glamours?
Yeah.
So this student might be in trouble for always putting glamours on things and being like, especially if it's like you handed this in, and this is supposed to be a sculpture that you made, and it's not. Your sculpture is pretty bad, and you tried to lie and pass it off with a glamour.
Right.
Not okay.
Not okay. You think a teacher can't see through a glamour that a 12-year-old casts?
It's not going to stop a kid from trying.
That's
Definitely.
true.
I love it.
It's true. That's fun.
Shape-shifting and glamour. Like I think I too really like the idea of it having a physical and a mental component, because if you can shapeshift, that is a physical adaptation, at least my understanding of the physical world. But if there's a glamour component, it also deals with the mental perception. So if each of these races kind of have two of these pieces of magic, that's a really fun way to
that would be cool if there was like a physical and a mental manifestation of whatever magic they had.
Then what would we want to do for access? Would that be like enchantment and beguilement, or would that be like conjuration so that you could like actually lock things up, unlock things, portals, even teleportation kind of stuff?
Because would a character that has access as a function of behavior, would they be like stealing stuff?
They might be, right? I want it, so I will find a way to get it.
And that's where some kind of portal, teleportation, intangibility might really play into that, right? It's like, this is behind alarmed glass. That's fine.
I could just pop in and pop back out.
Yeah.
Right. What would the mental component be then for access, right? If I want a thing, maybe then that's like
maybe
the
like persuasion
cantrip, right?
Yeah, that could be where kind of the enchanting is kind of the mental component of access, and then
like pushing someone to like give you what you want. But they like kind of, they don't really know what they're doing. They're not making a conscious choice. We are building a team of misfits, and I love it.
And this could be so cool, because this could just become a world that you write a whole bunch of middle grade stuff in to deal with all kinds of issues that kids deal with. Because this is a little darker, but I'm just imagining you using some of the stuff where we're looking at access, just the stuff we've created now, to talk about sexuality and consent.
Right.
Like as teens, like that would be.
Yeah, that's true. There's a dark side to pushing someone to do something that they don't want to do. That's true.
Right. And if people are using magic more instinctively, they may not have impulse control. So things like theft, self-harm, sexual abuse all might play a part in the troublesome, the maladaptive components that these young adults are experiencing.
Yeah, especially if
Okay.
you're not intending to do it, like with any of the glamours, or like the attention or the access. You may not be intending to do these things, but you are, and
Yeah.
you have to
Like
adjust to
compulsive
that.
liar
Kind of, yeah. Like it's a
casting
compulsive
glamours.
glamour thing where they're just like, drop the glamour. I'm trying. I
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah. I like that.
This
That's
is
really
super
cool.
cool.
So I think we have moved out of middle grade into young adult now.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
we're going to be talking about things like that,
Core series middle grade, I think is good, but there's just a lot of potential here is what I want to
for sure. And maybe there's
Some
like
sequence stories and books as our readers
yeah.
age.
I think we've got book one pretty well mapped out, and as much as I want to explore all of the others, I don't know. How are we doing on time, Lovis?
Yeah, no, we're out of time. We are
This is
out
the
of time.
biggest problem that we have.
Book one is good. I just want to put the pitch together. So we don't need to name the character right now, but we can say a character with attention-seeking functional behavior, as in like
In brackets.
in brackets, just so we know who they are, and their team of misfit friends.
This group of misfits has to prove the existence of a supposedly mythological race, or their terrible teacher will fail their project and try and make them fail blank grade. Yep, I like it.
It's an exciting starting point, you guys.
That's fun. That's
So
fun.
fun.
I like it. I like it very much.
Thank you guys for helping build this beautiful world, and I will continue to play it out in my imagination. If somebody would love to write it, contact Clark.
Oh, yes,
Lovis,
yes.
myself.
Yes, please.
Definitely. If anyone out there wants to write this story, have at it, and just please let us know if you do, because we would love to read it.
Yes.
So exciting.
Yes. Oh man.
We would definitely love to read it. Maybe one day, all these stories will exist. This by now 5-6 part series that we've just conceptualized.
And more to come. It sounds like you two are on a wonderful trajectory for using the blueprint and dealing with nerdy science and ecology. Lovis, I love this.
Well, thank you so much for
yeah.
being here.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank
you've
you.
been an absolute joy.
You guys. It's
Do you
my
want
pleasure.
to, for the last time, do you want to tell everyone where they can find you?
Absolutely. Details of the story, wonders of where it comes from, functions of behavior, depression, anxiety, or how to seek help in the description. Corri Moss-Hunter, California licensed marriage, family, child therapist.
Excellent.
And we'll put it down in the description for as long as that is your preferred form of communication. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Ecofictology, as well as the Magic Engineer over with Clark and all his wonderful magic blueprint and magic system building content. Definitely check out parts 1 through 3 if most of what we said in this episode didn't make sense to you. There's a lot more content for you in parts 1 through 3, and we hope you'll join us for our next episode of Spells and Specialists. So that is all from us today, and we'll see you next time.